Okay, so we've got Jody McIntyre, who is a journalist and international activist, to talk to you about his time in Palestine.
Hi everyone, thanks everyone for coming to a packed out room, which is always a good sign for a meeting like this. I spent 9 months of my life last year living in Palestine, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experiences there and how I think we need to mobilise in this country to support the Palestinian people in their struggle against the Israeli occupation. So, on August the 2nd last year, in the summer of last year, I was living with the Hanun family in East Jerusalem, in a neighbourhood called Sheikh Jarrah. And on August the 2nd, the day after my 19th birthday, I got a phone call from Jenna, one of the daughters of the family, to tell me that she'd like to make me a birthday cake to celebrate. And it was a very relaxing and enjoyable evening, eating the cake, listening to music, and all the family were there. But little did I know that just a few hours later, at around 4 o'clock in the evening, I would hear the sound of bricks flying through the kitchen windows, and I'd see armed Israeli forces rushing through the front door. And by the time they got into the front room, where I'd laid down just a few minutes earlier to have a rest, I realised that the Hanun family, this family that had become like my own family, were being evicted from their home. By the time the soldiers had forced me out of the house, they hadn't even allowed me to put my shoes back on my feet, and I saw my wheelchair to the left and explained that I needed it because I can't walk too well, and the Israeli soldiers said no, we don't care, and continued to push me away from the home. Now, there were also around 20 other foreigners that were staying with the family that night to show support and show solidarity with the family, but they were all arrested within less than 1 minute. But when one of the Israeli police officers came over to me and asked me in English, where are you from? I replied in Arabic that I don't understand English, so he didn't have the opportunity to arrest me. But I'll never forget what I heard the head of the Israeli police say to his officer when he heard my response. He said, "Don't worry about him, he's only a Palestinian." And that statement stayed with me for a long time, because to me it sums up the whole mind state of the Israeli state. From the Israeli government implementing discriminatory laws, to the Israeli police enforcing them, right down to the settlers that are literally stealing people's homes. So we were forced to cross the road from the house we were living in, the Hanun family's house, and an hour later we watched as settlers, American and British citizens, people that might have grown up in Manchester or Michigan and have the same passport that me and you have, and the same right to live in this country like we have, but have actively chosen to go to the Middle East and steal someone's home to live in. And I saw Jenna, the same 16-year-old girl who called me the night before to say that she wanted to make me a birthday cake, now completely distraught, with tears pouring from her eyes, and she said to me, "This is the second time I've been kicked out of my home, so how can I ever forget what has happened to me. But why am I telling you this story? Well, the reason is, what struck me about the story of the Hanun family is that this eviction was condemned from all levels of power. From the UN, it was condemned. The eviction was condemned by the American ambassador in Jerusalem, by our British ambassador in Jerusalem, by the EU, by the Czech ambassador, by the Swedish ambassador. Everyone condemned the Israelis' eviction of the Hanun family. But despite this, nothing changed, and they were still kicked out of their home. Now, what that says to me is that you cannot challenge political ideologies purely through the rhetoric of those in power. The words of the UN or the British government are not going to stop a planned ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem by the Israeli government. Now, what we need to do is challenge Israel's actions rather on a case-by-case level, on an ideological level. And it makes me very sad and almost ashamed to know that if I walk around the streets of Palestine, every child down to a very young age will know the name of Arthur Balfour, our foreign minister who signed the Balfour Declaration giving the land of Palestine to the Zionist Federation. But if I walk around in London, no one knows who Arthur Balfour is. So this is on the level we need to make people more aware, but not only that, to take action against what we see as a great injustice. Just as Malcolm X said, if you can't stand for something, then you'll fall for anything. So it's very important that we stand up for the Palestinians. And the reason I say this is because there's a growing trend in Britain now that we will be allowed the freedom of speech to say, for example, that we oppose the Israelis' invasion and massacre of Gaza, but we won't be allowed to challenge the very ideology of Zionism and of British imperialism, which has seen the death of not 1,500 people like we saw in Gaza, but the deaths of millions of people over several decades. Now, Tony Benn, the president of Stop the War, once said that you have no moral obligation to abide by a law that goes against your conscience. Now, in the same way, I feel that we have no moral obligation to abide by the laws of our government that do not represent us. So it's time for people here to rise up against our government, to support the Palestinian people that are rising up against the Israeli occupation. Thank you very much.